about education. Oops, thank you. It helps if we start, doesn't it? Let me start again. We'd like to welcome Jaime Casap this morning to our presentation. This is the first keynote of Wednesday on the Global Education Conference extravaganza. He is the Google Global Education we want to make sure that you are, if you need help with anything, we have a couple places for help, and they're posted on the slides here as well. There will be a survey at the end of this presentation, and we'd love to have your feedback about the conference and about the presentation via that survey. It will be sent to you as soon as we log out of the Blackboard Collaborate. If you are representing a nonprofit or school, we'd love to have you as an outreach partner for next year, so please consider doing that. And finally, continue the conversations after this event by going to our discussion forums and sharing your ideas, projects, resources, so on and so forth. And so without further ado, I'm going to, I need to thank our sponsors, first of all. IRN, Global Campaign for Education, the United States chapter, and all these people have really kind of helped bring this conference to you and made it free. So thank you, everyone, for your support. Steve and I are very grateful. Now, this is the fun part, Jaime, of beginning every session. We do a mapping activity. And I'm going to enable the whiteboard privileges for everybody. And you're going to click on the star tool, which is to the left of the whiteboard, and show Jaime where you are this morning, you are in the world. And in the chat, please tell us where you're logging in from. I'm in Northbrook, Illinois, just outside Chicago in the U.S. Wow. We've got everybody, wow, we've got a lot of people here. New York City, Seminole, Texas, Beijing, China, Mumbai, Thailand, Aberdeen, South Dakota. This is fabulous. Toronto, Canada. Lots of Canadians here. El Salvador. This is a really great diversity today this morning. I'm really pleased with this. So, Jaime, this will give you an idea that people are logging in from all over the place, but I guess that you're probably used to it with some of the Google initiatives that you're doing. Anyway, we're really pleased to have you, and I want to let you take it away and enjoy the presentation, and we'll take Q&A at the end, and I'll help moderate that. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Lucy, and thank you for inviting me to this, and thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. This is a great opportunity, one, to reach, as you said, a global audience. And by the way, if you're watching on video, welcome to my office, the only room in the house that my wife isn't allowed to touch, and it drives her crazy because the whole office looks like what you can see behind you. It's my little creative space. So welcome to Phoenix, Arizona. I'm excited to be here. And obviously, one of the reasons why is because I don't actually have to travel anywhere on an airplane, which I have to do later today. So excited to be here. Want to get started. Start with some contact information. You can follow me on Twitter, Google+, and I also write a blog. What's important about this is that this is where I do a lot of communication. You know, post articles, talk about different initiatives. If there's a Google Teacher Academy coming up, I will post it on here. This is, you know, you have a question for me, you have a question for Google, I can take that question, answer it, and everyone else who might have the exact same question can also see that as well. I'm actually in the process of trying to transfer my blog actually into just a Google Plus page so that I just post everything in one place. So lots of great places to be able to communicate using these media tools. So I just wanted to make sure you guys had that. All right, so the transformation of education. Let's get started because I think it's, you know, one of those things where we're in the middle of seeing a shift in education, and this couldn't be a more exciting time in education. Primarily because we understand the power that education can have. We can understand that education can literally transform poverty. It can actually disrupt poverty. It can actually cut it down, and not only for the person who is in poverty, but also for generations to come. Now, this is a personal experience for me because I know this firsthand. I'm a first generation American who grew up in Hell's Kitchen, New York, and with a single mom, no father, on welfare. I wouldn't say that growing up in Hell's Kitchen, New York was the easiest place to grow up. It's not the Hell's Kitchen that you see today. It's the one from the 70s and 80s. Not the nicest place. I watched lots of friends turn into criminals and drug addicts, and some into worse. And not something I wanted to experience, or I didn't want to live my life that way. And I saw education as the way out of that. And so I was able to get my high school degree, my college degree, my graduate degree, and here I am talking to a global audience. And that's the power that education can have from a transformation perspective. Now, more importantly, what I think it can do is transform our family's destiny for generations to come. This is my two kids, my 12-year-old and my 21-year-old. Yeah, it's still hard to say 21-year-old, by the way. It's, as a parent, for those of you who have small children out there, one of the most bizarre experiences that you can have as a parent is sitting at a restaurant and watching your kid ask the waiter, what kind of tequila they have. It's very bizarre because you're sitting there thinking, weren't you just ordering, Happy Meals 2 years ago? But anyway, so I have a 21-year-old, and she's in her third year of college, and she never asked me if she had to go to college. She never, I never told her she had to go to college. She just assumed she was going to college because I went to college, because her mother went to college and everyone around her went to college. She also assumed she's going to graduate school because I went to graduate school. And she assumes I'm paying for it, but that's okay. That's a good problem to have. Her expectation and my 12-year-old, who's been expecting to go to college since he was 5, their expectations of life is completely different than what my expectations were. What they are expecting that life has in store for them is completely different, and that's the power that education can have. It transforms families in just one generation. Now, what we're seeing in education now is this ability to think about, well, how do we create these excellent opportunities for students so that this opportunity and this transformation and what can happen with education is available to everyone. And as Lucy said, I get the chance to travel all around the world, and I get to see lots of different systems. And I'm really excited about all the different places that education is around the world. I just recently was in Ontario, Canada, for example, and they're doing incredible things with their education system. They've improved. We can say they've gone from good to great, and now they're thinking about how to go from great to excellent. So even for those systems where education is not so great, or even in systems where the education system might be pretty good, there's still room to grow. There's still room to transform, and that's what we're seeing across the board, because we have to be able to see graduation rates go up. We have to be able to see post-secondary education. We have to be able to see a different set of skills that these students have, because in the new economy, it's absolutely critical, right? When we think about where we are, and this is across the world as well, when we think about where we are, the world is basically broken down into two groups, right? We have, on the one hand, you have high-skill, high-wage group, and then you have low-skill, low-wage group. And the group that's been changing for a long time is that middle group where you could have a high school degree, or maybe not even a high school degree in the U.S. and be able to succeed and buy a house and a car and raise a family and potentially send them to college and all the other things that you can do. That world is disappearing, and we don't see very much of that coming back. And so this new economy that we're going into is consistent of having to have really strong skills, even if you're in that middle group, right? In 1973, 28% of jobs required a college degree in the U.S. And by 2018, more than 60% of jobs are going to require a college degree, right? So this is why being well educated in this new economy is absolutely critical to our economic well-being in the U.S. and every other country that I visit. They see the same thing. The new economy requires us and demands that we step up our game in what we're doing in education. Now, this all sounds like an absolutely, dreadful situation, and there's a lot that we have to do, and absolutely. But if we think about transformation and we see where we are, in our lifetime, we've seen shifts that are absolutely dumbfounding. So, for example, for most of history, the family that you were born into, the place you were born, the resources at your disposal, the proximity that you had even to libraries, were absolute determining factors in the access that you had to quality education, and therefore to your success. Now, when I was growing up, we had the Columbus Library on 51st Street and 10th Avenue. That's the library that we all had access to. Every school in the neighborhood, public, private, every member that lived in that community, that was our library, the Columbus Library. That's where our resources were. That's where I had to go to get information. And this wasn't the epicenter of information. It was closed at 5. It wasn't open on the weekends. It was always packed with people. And in our lifetime, this has shifted, right? And now all the world's information is at our fingertips. And so this transformation happened right before our eyes. Those of us who are old enough to appreciate this can see that just in our own lifetime, in the short number of years that we've been on Earth, this transformation, this shift from having to go to a place to get information to now all that information and 100 times that information is now at our fingertips. And so we have to ask ourselves, if this transformation has happened in our social settings and just in education in general and how we get access to information, why is it that my 12-year-old 7th grade classroom looks basically the same as, actually exactly the same as my 7th grade classroom looked, 100 years ago? And even the same policies are in place. My 7th grader has to turn in his iPhone before he can go into class. He has to go to a box, drop off his device, and then go to class. He's not allowed to have it in his classroom. When I was in 7th grade, it was my Casio calculator watch. I don't know how many of you remember the Casio calculator watch, but that's what I had, and I wasn't allowed to use it. I had to take it off when I was in class. So even the policies are the same as to what we do with the technology that we have on our person in what we do. So we have to look at what policies we have in place and what makes sense and what works. Now, we've been talking about technology in education for a really, really long time, right? I know that it started with motion pictures back in the early 1900s and how motion pictures were going to transform education. And then it was television and how television was going to transform education. And then we've been talking about computers in education since at least the 1960s. And all of these were labeled revolutionary advancements that were going to transform education in ways that haven't been seen since the printing press, right? Those are the arguments that we heard and we've been hearing for a long time. So we have to ask ourselves, what's different this time? Why is it different? Why is technology an important factor in what we do in education? Well, I'm going to propose 3 quick things. First, we recognize that in order to do good education, it has to be relevant, it has to be engaging, so therefore it has to be personal. Now, I'm not saying that it has to be individualized to every single person, but you have to find ways that individuals can connect to education. We have enough evidence, we have enough studies, we have enough research that shows us that we have to be able to make education relevant and engaging. And technology can help us with that. Technology helps us with that in our personal lives. We see our use of technology. We see our use of the web in very personal ways. We bookmark our sites and we know where to go get information. We've personalized the technology and web experience for ourselves. And that same kind of concept can work really, really well in an educational setting where we can make education very personal for folks in that place. Number 2, if all of you were in a room together, and I do this at conferences where I speak, I asked the audience, how many of you, and I know I can use these buttons, but I'm not very good at this, but how many of you have not used the web today? We wouldn't be talking right now if we weren't using the web, right? And so that's what I asked the audience. And you get this kind of funny reaction because almost no one ever raises their hand. Even if you have 2,000, 3,000 people in a room, it doesn't matter what time of day the talk is at, almost no one raises their hand because every one of us is on the web using technology, most of us as soon as we wake up, right? The idea that we wake up and we turn on our technology and we use it right away, even before our feet hit the ground, is a relatively new concept, right? I call it the new morning cigarette. My wife does it. She wakes up and flicks on her phone and is immediately online. That's the power that the extraordinary way that technology has integrated into the core of our daily lives. We use technology, we're using the web on a daily basis, where before, when we talked about the use of and the power of technology in education, it was this separate thing. Today, we recognize the importance and power as adults that technology and the web can have on our daily lives. And so we have to ask ourselves, back to the idea of my 7th grade classroom, why does it look the same in that classroom? Why is it that our world has shifted, but nothing has shifted in the education space? And I think that power, that potential is there, right? So, think about, what it's been like in the last, 5 or 6 years, or even the last 10 years, how long it took us to make that connection to technology and the web. I mean, most of you probably remember that we used to have to call the internet, right, with our home phones, and the internet was busy and it wouldn't talk to us, and we would get frustrated. But eventually, after trying for an hour or 2 hours, we'd finally get on, and what was our reward was a bunch of pages that had words and links to pages that had words and links. That's what our big reward was. And every once in a while, somebody would put up a picture, and it would take an extra 10 minutes to download that, right? And we were so excited about that. And today, our expectation is that we are connected all the time. I lose my mind when I am traveling on an airplane at 35,000 feet, 535 miles an hour when the web is slow on an airplane. And that happened in a year, right? That's our expectation in a year. I've watched teachers, some of the best people in the world, turn into a mob at a conference if the technology or if the web connections were slow. That's the power that technology and the web has had in our personal lives. And so we have to ask ourselves, what's the impact to our kids and what they see as an expectation? I mean, it wasn't that long ago, if you think about it, that we used to use our technology and our web at work instead of at home, because that's where we had access. And in the United States, we are upon pretty soon another one of our famous sayings called Cyber Monday, which is the day after what we call Thanksgiving in the U.S. And we have we go shopping. And why don't you, a little exercise would be, go ask a 10-year-old what Cyber Monday means and why we call it Cyber Monday, and they would have no idea. But the reason we call it Cyber Monday is because we used to have to go to work to use our technology. We had web access at work, our technology was at work, our devices were at work, our applications were at work. And today, you look at research, and most people use their own devices to work, right? Most of us find that our own personal devices are better than the devices oftentimes that we get at work, right? That's the transformational aspect of what's happening in this space in terms of the use of technology on a social scale. So imagine what it means for a 5-year-old going into our school. Now, the next thing is that's happening is this generation of kids, this web generation of kids that are going into our schools. I want you to think about the technology that you're currently using. If you're accessing this via a laptop or a tablet, or look at your tablet or your smartphone or whatever cool device that you have, or whether you bought the new iPad Air or any technology that you have. And I want you to think about a 5-year-old that is starting school, that started school this year, and then realize that that technology that you have in your hand that you think is cutting edge and cool is the worst technology that that 5-year-old will ever see in their life, right? I like to call it their Commodore 64. That's the level of the expectations, or where our kids are starting with expectations, right? This is a picture of my 12-year-old. This is inside last year, and he's on the couch. I'm next to him. I'm trying to watch American football on a Sunday morning, and here he is in his pajamas, barely awake, and he's got two machines. And on one machine, he's playing this new game that he discovered called Minecraft, and I'm sure you're all familiar with the game. And on the other machine, he is watching videos teaching himself how to play Minecraft. And one machine isn't fast enough for him. He has to use two machines. He has to be able to access two machines at the same time. This is the generation of kids that are going into our school systems. They don't notice the web as something that is on or off. They just think of it as on. In the same way that we look at electricity, we walk in a room and we flip a switch and we expect it to be on. This generation expects to walk into a room, flip the switch of technology in the web, and expect it to be on. And then again, they go into a classroom and they're living in a completely different world. It doesn't make sense to them. They're not complaining about it because they think that's just the way the world is, but they're starting to complain about it. This same kid here last year asked me what I thought about the idea of him dropping out of school and just traveling around with me because he thought he can learn more, and he had this proposal about how he could create his own lesson plans. This is the generation of kids that are going into our school system. This generation of kids are expecting to be able to do things anywhere, anytime, with any device, right? This is the generation of kids who are absolutely critical of not being able to do these things at the same time. Now, it's important to understand here that I'm not saying that this generation of kids, or these kids coming into our schools, are any different than we are, right? They're not superhuman. They're not, they're not wired differently, and I would be cautious of any presenter who says to you that this generation of students is somehow superhuman or wired differently, or they can multitask and do 5 things at the same time. They can't. They're exactly like us. They are wired exactly like us. Evolution has not happened that fast, and they do exactly one thing at a time, or if they try to even do 2 things at a time, they fail miserably, just like we do. But how they learn how to do things is different. Their expectation of how they learn how to do things is different. I'll share a quick story with you about my 21-year-old. A couple of years ago, we were in Hawaii on our family vacation, and she wanted a ukulele. She's a musician. She likes to play music, and she likes different instruments. So, she's scared to fly, and so, we promised her a ukulele when we got to Hawaii. So we got to Hawaii, first day there. We go into town, we find a ukulele store, and she buys a ukulele. And as she's leaving the store, she says, she's leaving the store, and I look in the corner and I see instruction videos and books on how to play the ukulele. And, like an idiot, I say, do you want to pick up a video or an instruction book so you can learn how to play the ukulele? And she looked at me like I was from outer space. She looked at me like there was something wrong with me. Why? Because she's going to learn how to play the ukulele watching YouTube videos. And I'm sure you were all thinking the same thing. She's going to find 10 people that can teach her to play one song, and she's going to find the right person that somehow connects. And she might not even know why, but there's something about that one person that she can connect with that teaches her the way she needs to learn. That's the expectation that our kids have, is that they see technology and they see the web as an opportunity to engage in lots of different ways. They don't see experts the way we see experts. Now, speaking of students and this generation of students, I love to talk to students as often as I get, as often as the chance that I can get. So I talk to students all the time. I go visit schools. Whether they're in 5th grade, 6th grade, or in high school, I love to talk to students, especially in school districts that have a majority of students who have students who grew up like I did and are either in a low-income school district or poverty school district or big minority school district. And I take that opportunity because, one, they need to see that they need to hear from someone like me and be able to say to them, hey, if I did this, if I grew up this way and I was able to do this, you can do this as well, and kind of lay out the fundamentals of what that means and why that's important. But the other thing that I do is I don't ask them what do they want to be when they grow up. I don't tell them that they should go to college so that they can be an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer, because a lot of these kids growing up in those communities like the one I grew up don't understand what those things are. They don't know what an engineer is. They haven't seen an engineer. They don't know, what all the, the top 10 different career choices are. So instead, what I ask them is, what problem are you interested in? What problem do you want to solve? And get them to think about the problems that they potentially face themselves or that they see in the world. And the problem can be anything from, solving world hunger to making a car go faster. Whatever the problem is that they define, that's what I want them to think about. What problem do you want to solve? And then I challenge them to think about what education they need to solve that problem. And when I say education, I mean the big word education, not just, what classes they can take. So I challenge them to go back and research, what classes can they take, what online classes they can take, what books should they be reading, what articles can they find, what magazines can they subscribe to, what blogs they should be looking at, what experts they should be following, what YouTube videos they should watch, and so on and so on and so on, because they have that capability and that opportunity to get engaged at that level to kind of create their education. And one of the things that I admit to, and I don't know if some of you would admit to this, is I remember when I graduated from graduate school, and I remember the day very clearly, and I remember thinking to myself, I am done with school. I am done learning. I never have to learn again. And I admit to that because that's what I thought was supposed to happen. I was a student. I was done being a student, so therefore I didn't have to be a student anymore. I didn't have to learn anything. And obviously, 100 years later, I recognize that that's just not true, and that we are lifelong learners, and that we constantly have to learn, and we constantly have to adapt, and we constantly have to get more information, and that we are never experts in anything, and that mastery is something that we should always seek but never find, because we are constantly searching for it. That mentality is what we have to put into our kids. And even the word student is a word that I'd like to get rid of, because I want to be able to say to our kids, you're lifelong learners. You just happen to be in this structure so that we can put a lot of that into your head right now, but you're always going to be learners. This doesn't go away. This isn't something that you can just walk away from. So hopefully we can get to the point where we're not even talking about students versus teachers, and that we all recognize that we are lifelong learners. Now, other things that I talk to these kids about is the idea of iteration. And one of the reasons why I bring up the word iteration is because we like to use the word failure in education. I hear it all the time. We need to teach our kids how to fail. And again, especially for kids that are growing up in poor neighborhoods and see failure around them 24 hours a day, the word failure isn't necessarily something that resonates really well with that group of kids. And so I don't like the word failure because it seems like it has an opposite word, which is succeed. So either you succeed or you fail. And if we're teaching our kids that they only learn from failure, I think that we're not really giving them the whole story. And what I mean by that is that I really believe in the word iteration. Iteration happens whether something good happens or something bad happens. This is a picture of Google Project Loon, where we're launching balloons over New Zealand to provide internet access. And these are all experiments and things that we're playing with. But, it's like launching the first balloon, and even if it's successful, that team is right back at it, trying to find it even a better way, iterating an even better way to launch the balloon, to track it, to make the components lighter, to use a different type of material, to make it better all the time. So iteration is something that I talk to them about, something that is part of this new economy where it's not black and white, it's not success or failure, it's constant iteration on whether you get something right or whether you get something wrong. I also talk to them about the idea of collaboration. And collaboration is one of those interesting words that we use a lot in education. It's important that we all recognize and we all admit to the fact that school is an individualized sport, right? And the problem is that we live in a team-based world. And almost every level of learning is focused on the individual. You do your homework, you study alone, you take a test alone. Excuse me. You graduate you move up a grade. You graduate from high school. So it's you, and then we push you out the door and we say, all right, go work with others. Good luck. And so the whole idea of collaboration, imagine as a teacher, you hand out a test to a typical 7th grade class, and it's a typical test, and at the end of the test, 2 kids walk up to you and they say, hey, we did this test together. As a teacher, what would your reaction be? And so right off the bat, we have to think about why we think collaboration is cheating, right? Why 2 kids working together to solve a problem is actually cheating. It's not sending the right message to students. And collaboration is more than just working together, right? We hear that word all the time, but it's important to understand that we all work together in lots of different ways. And collaboration is actually more than working together. Collaboration is about learning from another person, right? It's about active listening and responding with thoughtful questions. It's about using words like yes and what if, instead of saying things like yes but, or statements like, yeah, but that doesn't make sense. Let me tell you what really makes sense, right? I mean, collaboration is about being able to really understand someone else's perspective and someone else's point of view. It's also recognizing that your idea is only as good as the next iteration of that idea based on feedback and comments and action from other people. That's what real collaboration is about. It's really about having respect for another person's, expertise and point of view. And at the end of the day, collaboration is also about, being able to change your mind. It's being able to sit there and listen to something and say, you know what? Your idea is better. I think we should go with that. Let's build off of that idea. Being able to listen to somebody and change your mind. Somehow we've lost the ability to change our mind, and we need to bring that back into our students' heads. And that's what real collaboration is about. I also talk to them about the idea of becoming digital leaders, not just consumers of technology and the internet. Digital citizenship is really critical, but digital citizenship is the minimum requirement for this new economy. This generation has to be about becoming digital leaders. So what they post online, what they share online, what they contribute online are the reasons why we have to be, why they go to college, why they get an internship, why they built their digital portfolio in a positive way, not the reason why. And so digital citizenship is the minimum requirement, but they have to become creators. They don't have to not only watch YouTube videos, they have to create YouTube videos. They have to read blogs and write blogs. They have to be able to look at websites and build websites. I mean, it's an equal balance. They have to become leaders in this space. And so we have to ask ourselves, where are they learning this skill? If they're not learning it in school, where are they going to learn how to do this? And if they're not learning how to do this, the only thing they're learning how to do is consume. And so we have to turn the whole idea of the consumption of technology and the web into something more positive and help them build. And so I talk to them about that. Now, what's critical is that transformation of what the classroom looks like, and really about the at the end of the day, what we're asking teachers to do. And my proposal is that we don't have to ask teachers to be the magic box of information in a room anymore. We don't have to ask teachers to be the Google in a room, if you will, right? One of the cool things that I thought of that being a parent would provide me is one of the benefits of being a parent that I thought I had was that I could just make things up whenever I wanted to. That I could just make up stories or make up answers whenever I wanted to. And Google stole that from me, because now when my 12-year-old questions something even a little bit for me, the first thing he does is he reaches into his pocket, pulls out his phone, he's like, Papi, I don't know if that's necessarily true. Let's look it up. And so I'm being vetted 24 hours a day by my 12-year-old, right? The information is at our fingertips. And so personally, when my 12-year-old or my daughter when she was younger, and she still does this, but when she comes to me, when they come to me and ask me a question, and I know they can look it up, I say to them, and I hate hearing this, but I say to them, listen, I think you keep forgetting, I work for a search engine. I'm not actually the search engine. Go look it up. And then it's my responsibility to follow up. It's my responsibility to find out, well, what did you find? Does it make sense? Did you vet it? Did you check the source? Do you know it's true? Has anyone else confirmed it? What does it mean? How do you apply it? All these things that we're supposed to be asking our kids about the information that they're finding. So to me, what we have to do is, recognize that we don't have to be the Google in the room anymore, and that's at our kids' fingertips. And so our job is to help kids take information and the abundance of information that's available to them at their fingertips and help them convert that information into intelligence. To be able to take information and make sense of it, to analyze it, to make it into intelligence so that they can have a point of view, or so that they can create things, or so that they can have an original thought based on what they find. It's up to us, as adults, as teachers, as parents, as anyone, to be able to embed in our kids the desire not to just look up something, but to actually understand something deeply, right? And we have to start by not giving them credit for something that they can just look up, right? So I think that we need to focus on that. Now, on a global scale, I find that this idea of what we need to do in education is something that you find around the world. Education as a silver bullet, education as fundamental to an economy, education as fundamental to a democracy, education as fundamental to the growth of a nation, is a theme that you find across the world. This was actually a picture that I took when I was on vacation with my family, with my two kids. We were in Peru for 2 weeks this past summer, although spending 2 weeks with your kids can't really be defined as a vacation. But anyway, so we were in Peru. We did the whole Machu Picchu thing. We were there for 2 weeks in different parts of the country. We were having dinner in Machu Picchu Pueblo, and we hear a rally going out in the courtyard. So we go outside, and there's a political rally going on, and everyone there was wearing this shirt. And for those of you who can't read it, it says, the great change can only come through education. And that struck me as so powerful, because this is a pueblo in the middle of Peru that is only accessible by train or by walking there, and they get it. They see the power in this little pueblo of what education can do for them. And that theme is global across the world. Now, when I talk to administrators, and I talk to folks that are decision makers or are in charge of what our educational systems look like, I get them to recognize that the teachers of this generation are absolutely the most important people and the most important factor in a child's education. And that they are the generation of teachers that are going to be creating what the new learning models are going to look like for generations to come. Whether it's something that's, project-based learning, or these new maker models, or something that we do around, blended learning flipped classrooms, distance learning, all these different models that are coming up. This generation of teachers are creating what those new learning models look like. So I talk to administrators about giving them space, about giving them the opportunity to iterate, by giving them the opportunity to collaborate with each other and with other teachers and other educators and other experts from around the world to put these models together that can iterate, that can create the kinds of outcomes that we're looking for around the skills that kids need for the future around communication, collaboration, problem solving, critical thinking, building intelligence, and those types of things. And so this generation of teachers are that generation that are going to create this, and so we have to give them enough space, room, and time to be able to work out these models. And that's what's really exciting, because I think, 100 years from today, the classroom won't look the same, or education won't look the same. And we can't say that about 100 years ago. And it has to be exciting to be in education, to know that this is that paradigm shift, that this is where those new models will come from. And as I mentioned just a couple seconds ago, when I talk to administrators, I also make sure that they understand that the role of the teacher in this new world is even more important than it was before, and that at the end of the day, the teachers are the most critical factor in the kids' education, and will continue to be that forever, and even more so in this new space. And that they need that kind of space to be able to create those types of environments. Because at the end of the day, to a student in the classroom, especially a student like me who grew up the way I grew up, the teacher is absolutely critical. I remember I've been fortunate in my life and my career to have met some great people, but we have to recognize that my 4th grade teacher was absolutely critical in showing me how to be creative, or my 6th grade teacher helped me express myself and helped me learn how to write, or my 9th grade teacher that taught me math in ways that I'd never seen before. These are absolutely fundamental, components of my development, and that teacher is absolutely critical to a student. And so we have to give teachers a space, but we also have to give them the professional development and the training and what they need so that they can create what those new learning models are going to look like. We have to invest in the future, right? We recognize that technology is part of our daily lives, and it has to be part of our educational environment. And so infrastructure has to be part of this as well. We don't build schools and say, hey, we're only going to put electricity on the 1st and 2nd floor. We're not going to put it on the 3rd and 4th floor. We can't build schools without broadband. We don't, build schools without, desks and whiteboards and all the other things that we need. We shouldn't be looking at schools without technology as a component of that as well, right? We have to be able to invest in what this model looks like so that teachers can create these new learning models. We have to recognize that from a transformation perspective, innovation is what causes this transformation. And we're in a part right now where we can see some of the things that are happening in this space taking that next step in the transformation. Right now, a lot of technology is helping kind of replace a lot of the technology, a lot of the processes that we have. But we have to make sure that we keep our eye on the ball, and that we don't just take technology and make education more efficient and faster, but that we are actually using the technology, and that we're actually using these new learning models to transform what learning looks like. And that's what I'm excited about in this transformation, is that next stage of what innovation in education is going to look like. And it's important for all of us to realize and recognize that we're just getting started, that from a technology perspective, from a Google perspective, from anyone who's developing stuff in this space, we are literally just getting started. Like I mentioned before, it wasn't that long ago that we used to have to call the internet with our home phones. It wasn't that long ago that none of us left the house with a computer in our pocket. And so we have to think about what the world is going to look like 2 years from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, that we're just getting started in this space. But it's also just as important to keep in mind that technology is not the silver bullet. Technology is enabling and supporting education. It is not there to transform education. great education, great ideas, new learning models will transform education. Great education creates great education. Technology doesn't do anything but support it and enable it. And it's important for everyone to remember that, especially those of us in the technology field. And our job and our responsibility is to make sure that we build the technology that's easy to use, that's scalable, that's manageable, that is absolutely transformative, but in its simplicity, right? And so that's what our responsibility is. Now, none of this is easy to do. Absolutely hard work in front of us that we have in this transformational effort and what's going on in education. But I like to, to look at things in comparison, right? We have a system that's fundamentally pretty good, right? Test scores have improved over the generations. Graduation rates have improved over the last couple of decades. Education as a model of how it was built and what it was meant to do has improved over time. And technically doing exactly what it was meant to do. It's producing the results that it was meant to produce, which is a population that has about a 75% graduation rate and a population where about 30% of people go to some post-secondary education. The problem is that the world has changed around us and that we live in this global economy and the world has dramatically shifted, and the evidence of that is absolutely clear. And so we have two choices. We either have to take this on, we have to take this transformation project on and find ways to shift what education looks like to match the global world and the global economy and the global needs that we face. Or the other idea, or the other alternative, is that we can build a giant time machine and all of us can get into it and we can go back to 1970. Those are our two choices. And so if the second is easier to do than the first, then let's do that. But I kind of think that the first one is a better scenario or a better idea than the first. And that's what I'm excited about, is that we don't really have a choice, that we have to do this transformation, and I'm excited to be part of it. So, Lucy, I'm done. Thank you very much again for inviting me to this. This has been very exciting. And I'd love to be able to take the last 10 or 12 minutes if there's questions there, if you want to help me get some of those questions up.
Yeah, this has been fascinating. And this has been one of the best discussions in our chat room of all the keynotes, I think. And so I will save the text for you and email it to you separately so you can see it, because a lot's been flying by. It was fabulous. Really, really good food for thought. And I think a lot of us are in agreement with you. So can you tell us, people, if you have questions, people, please put them in the chat and I'll ask them of Jaime. But for my own, just to kind of, to kind of tie it into Google a little bit, what is Google's stance about education in general? What are some of the things that are kind of cool that are going on in the education space via Google? I know Google Helpouts was just announced. Do you want to kind of do a little pitch about stuff that you guys are up to there?
Yeah, and what's fascinating about Google, and I get the questions like, why or how or where is Google involved in education? And I always like to remind folks that Google has been involved in education since the day we launched, right? The idea that information is education, it helps build intelligence, has been there since the first day. So the first day that you launched a Google website and searched for something, you were educating yourself, unless, of course, you were looking just for a place to go eat or something. But if you were looking for information, you were educating yourself. And so Google has been involved in education since the beginning. And so that's an absolutely, fundamental thing. And everything that we do can have an education aspect to it, right? Being able to use, for example, Google search to do education, but also be able to do things like use Google Earth to find places in the world, or be able to use any of the other products that we have. Now, specifically, we obviously have Google Apps for education, which has turned into kind of a fundamental communication and collaboration tool. So we have that, and that's specific to education with its own unique terms of services, where there are no ads in Gmail, where it's specific to education. You can create closed domains. You can open or close different applications. We have that. We obviously have Chromebooks, and Chromebooks have been very successful in education. And again, I think they've been successful in education because most people recognize that scalability and manageability is absolutely critical when we do education. You know, I always say that here in the U.S., the day I dread the most, and it's coming up pretty soon, is December 26th, which is the day after Christmas, because that's the day I have to go do all the technical support at my in-laws' house for all the new gadgets that they bought. And I dread that day, and so I can only imagine all our technologists in the education space, you know, getting their hands on 500 laptops or 3,000 laptops and trying to manage and scale those. So Chromebooks have been successful because they're easy to manage, they're easy to scale, and there's not a lot of touch that's involved in managing those. So you can go from 30 in a classroom to 30,000 in a school district pretty quickly. We just launched Google Play in education with Android tablets, where we're trying to do the same thing. We can do some really cool things already, like you know, being able to find applications or content that's critical for your classroom, and then launch that to your students on their devices without, you know, ever having to touch those devices. And so, you know, this is version 1 of those capabilities and what we're doing. So we recognize the importance of education and all the different things that we can do in this space. So we're trying to do as much as we can.
Yeah, a couple other things too. The Google Science Fair, if you guys don't know about that, I think that's pretty impressive too.
Yes.
There's lots of stuff. I put the Google and Education website up there. You also might want to follow their Google Plus page. They're doing amazing stuff with Hangouts. I've seen just incredible Hangouts with NASA and National Geographic and stuff like that too.
Yeah, we also launched Classroom Collaborators. And if you ask me on Twitter or in my Twitter feed, there's probably all these announcements already because I post all these things out there. But you're right, Lucy, there's all these different things. I mean, just the idea of Hangouts and the fact that we can bring experts in. You know, a teacher can do a Hangout with any expert anywhere in the world and bring them into a classroom is just, you know, transformational.
So my personal, you know, request of you is, I hope Google finds a way to make our conference possible in Google Hangouts, because I would love to be able to mass create 300 rooms for each of these presentations and have people do it. So that's just my personal request. Anyway, we have some, because I think that's the future, really. We have a couple questions here from participants. How can businesses engage with this new innovative, tech-savvy workforce? And I will mention that there was a presentation yesterday by a school in Massachusetts, and no, who was it that mentioned it? No, it was the guy from the Asia Society, Brandon Wiley, mentioned how something about this in his presentation. So whoever asked that, go look at that archive. But Jaime, how do you think businesses can engage with this new innovative tech-savvy workforce?
Right. So I think one of the things there is, let's define tech-savvy, right? So I get all the time that this young generation is tech-savvy, and I think that they're just exposed to technology. It doesn't necessarily make them, you know, experts in that space. So anyone can become tech-savvy is what I'm trying to say. And I've seen teachers that are, you know, in their 70s show me things that they do with technology that are mind-blowing, and I've seen teachers who are, you know, 25 who don't know how to attach an email because they haven't had, or attach to an email because they haven't had to do that before. So tech-savvy is one of those relative terms. Now, from a business perspective, I think that this is fundamental for lots of different, in lots of different spaces. But this generation of workers that are coming into the workforce, this millennial generation, if you will, unless we've come up, you know, I like to think of them as the web generation. They have great ideas. They have the ability to use technology, and we have to be able to give them some space to iterate, to experiment, to try different things, because that's what they're looking for. I look at the data and I look at some of the research, and what's interesting is a lot of kids that are graduating college today, they're not applying to jobs at big companies. You know, they're not looking for specific jobs. A lot of them are starting their own jobs. And so how do you take that mentality, or, you know, how do you take that I want to start my own X, right, and bring that into your organization to give them that space to do that? At Google, we have Project X, which is, you know, this 10X project where we're trying to find and solve problems in an exponential way. So Google Glass is part of that. Self-driving cars is part of that. Google, the Loon project with the balloons is part of that. You don't have to be that extreme, but what are your project X's, and how can you utilize this generation of experimenters and those that want to start their own businesses and take advantage of that?
Okay, another question. In what ways do you see technology supporting academic success?
So I see technology supporting academic success in the same way that I see technology supporting everything else that we're doing around the world, right? So technology has been integrated into every other industry, right? Banking, for example, I take pictures of my check and I never have to go to the bank again. If I can get rid of cash, I would be excited, right? If you look at the music industry and you think about our kids, my 12-year-old has never bought an album in his entire life. He never will. He buys them one song at a time. You look at entertainment and the fact that Blockbuster just closed. I mean, do you guys remember that we used to go to Blockbuster like 2 years ago, or maybe a little longer than that? But Blockbuster closed its doors, so it's transformed what entertainment. As a matter of fact, I was walking through a store a couple of days ago and looking at videos and thinking, do I really have to buy this video? Isn't this video going to be available to me for the rest of my life in some capacity somewhere where I can just access it? Do I really have to own it? And so we can see these transformations happen in other industries. And so in education, the ability to actually manage our own learning, right? And the idea that learning and students are not mutually exclusive. I am a student, but if I say to somebody I'm a student, the first question they're going to ask me is, where are you going to school, right? School is the whole world, and so how do we use technology and access the web and access the components? If anything, we have too much information. We have too many applications. We have too much stuff. And so I think that ability to reach all that stuff is what's going to be fundamental in the shift in personal learning. So the key question is, how do I know whether I'm good at this stuff? And so that whole idea around assessments come up. How do I know when I'm starting to master some of these key concepts? And so we're starting to see a lot of this development around assessments, and how do you tell? How do you get a badge? How do you get a certificate? How do you get someone recognizing that you might know stuff, and how do we do that? I think that's the next fundamental question, is how do I know that this stuff is working, is where we're headed.
We have some really good questions. Let's try and get a couple more in. So
sure.
what would be your elevator pitch to a student considering being a teacher these days?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I first of all I should say that I'm a professor at Arizona State University, and I haven't done it in a couple of semesters, and I miss it. I miss that kind of concept of being in the classroom. I also should point out that my dream job is, and I'm not necessarily saying that this is going to happen in the future, but my dream job is to be a history teacher and a basketball coach at a high school. So it's easy for me to pitch the idea because I love it so much. But my elevator pitch to a kid and convince them that they want to go into education is the transformational nature of the impact that they can have. If this is a kid that wants to have an impact, the fact that they can impact X number of lives forever is absolutely critical. So my elevator pitch would be a story about how, I've met the President of the United States, and I've met Vince Cerf, who's a mentor, and I have conversations with some of the world leaders. But at the end of the day, my fourth grade teacher is someone I will never, ever forget, and I will always have thanks for.
I think that's the perfect way to end this presentation. That's great, Jamie. Thank you so much. This has been a super treat. The recording, everyone, will be available about 10 minutes after we stop. So make sure that you check, you look for it. It will be on YouTube at some point as well. But thank you for coming, for your questions. You can follow Jamie on Google Plus and on Twitter, and follow up with him if you have some more questions. Thanks again for your time, Jamie. We really appreciate it. And
thanks, Lucy. Good luck with the rest of the conference, and I hope everyone is enjoying it as much as I am.